The city lights shimmered against the tall glass walls of Harrington Enterprises, one of the most prestigious corporate buildings downtown. Inside, every step echoed power and perfection: white marble floors, employees dressed in elegance, and the air scented faintly of coffee and ambition. At the very top of that empire sat Evelyn Harrington, the company's CEO, a woman known for her intelligence, discipline, and sharp sense of control. People called her the Iron Heart, not because she was cruel, but because she was unshakably focused. She built her empire from the ground up after her husband's passing, raising her only daughter, Leela, almost single-handedly. Leela was everything Evelyn hoped she'd be: bright, curious, and gentle. But recently, something had changed. Leela had started coming home late from school, her uniform wrinkled, her shoes dusty, and her smile mysterious. Evelyn noticed, but she was too buried under meetings and deals to ask. One Friday evening, Evelyn left work early, a rare occasion, to surprise her daughter at the private academy where she studied. As she entered the school, she noticed how quiet the corridors were. It was well past study hours, and yet faint voices came from the basement floor. Evelyn followed the echo of soft laughter and the scratch of pencils against paper. What she saw next made her freeze. There, under the dim yellow light of the janitor's office, her daughter Leela sat cross-legged on the floor, studying side by side with the school janitor, an elderly man in a worn uniform, with gentle eyes and calloused hands. He was helping Leela solve a math problem on a piece of scrap cardboard. Evelyn's first reaction was anger at the impropriety. At the sight of her daughter sitting on the cold floor, learning from a janitor when she could afford the best tutors in the city, she almost stormed in, but paused as she heard them talk. The janitor, Mr. Bennett, spoke softly, explaining a complex algebra equation with patience that could melt any heart. Leela listened intently, nodding and laughing when she made mistakes. "You see, Miss Leela," Mr. Bennett said, smiling, "numbers are like people. They need balance. Every problem has a solution. You just have to treat both sides fairly." Evelyn's hand froze on the doorknob. That sentence struck her deeper than she expected. Balance both sides. The words sounded like they were meant for her. For the first time, she didn't interrupt. Instead, she leaned quietly against the wall and listened. When the study session ended, Leela hugged Mr. Bennett and thanked him for teaching her. "Mom doesn't have time to help me much," she said softly, "and you explain things so easily. I wish everyone taught like you." Evelyn's throat tightened. She backed away quietly, ashamed of her assumptions, her busy schedule, her emotional distance. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying the sight, her daughter sitting joyfully with a janitor, learning not just math, but humility, gratitude, and simplicity. The next morning, she drove to the school early, before anyone else arrived. She found Mr. Bennett mopping the hallway, humming to himself. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, startled but polite. Evelyn crossed her arms. "Mr. Bennett, I saw you last evening teaching my daughter. May I ask why?" Her tone was calm, but her eyes searched his face for an answer. Mr. Bennett wiped his hands nervously on his uniform. "She asked for help, ma'am. I didn't mean any disrespect. I used to be a math teacher before life changed. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. A teacher? Then why are you cleaning floors? He smiled faintly. Sometimes life tests us in strange ways. My wife got sick years ago. I sold my books, my house, everything to pay for her treatment. After she passed, I never went back to teaching. I just stayed here. But when your daughter asked for help, I saw in her eyes the same curiosity my old students had. I couldn't say no. Evelyn's heart softened. For the first time in years, she didn't see a janitor. She saw a man of dignity and wisdom, someone who carried invisible scars, but still gave selflessly. She asked him to continue helping Leela, and even offered to pay him extra, but he refused. "Ma'am," he said kindly, "teaching her is my joy. She reminds me that no one is too small to learn, and no one too great to teach." Evelyn nodded quietly, her eyes moist. That day, she watched Leela and Mr. Bennet again, this time from the doorway, without judgment. Leela's laughter filled the air, and Evelyn realized how much she had missed that sound in her own home. Weeks passed, and something miraculous began to change, not in Leela, but in Evelyn herself. She started coming home earlier, asking Leela about her lessons, her day, her dreams. They had dinner together for the first time in months. The office lights at Harrington Enterprises began to dim earlier too. The CEO no longer stayed until midnight. Employees whispered that the Iron Heart was softening. One afternoon, Evelyn invited Mr. Bennet to the company's headquarters. He looked completely out of place in his worn shoes among the glass offices, but Evelyn greeted him warmly. "I owe you something," she said. "You reminded me that success means nothing if you forget where you came from and who you're doing it for." She offered him a full-time teaching position in the company's community education program, a project she had long neglected. Mr. Bennet's eyes widened, tears brimming. "Thank you, ma'am. But truly, I didn't do it for reward. I did it because your daughter believed in learning." Evelyn smiled. "And because of you, I believe in people again." That evening, Evelyn came home to find Leela waiting for her with a handmade card that read, "Thank you for believing in me, Mom." Evelyn hugged her daughter tightly, whispering, "You taught me more than any boardroom ever could." But as peaceful as it seemed, the story wasn't over. Days later, Evelyn discovered a file in her office, a sealed document connected to Mr. Bennet's past. Inside was something shocking, something that would reveal who he truly was, and why fate had brought him into their lives at the perfect time. To be continued in Chapter 2. And as the narrator's voice fades, the screen slowly darkens with the words, "Speech balloon, sometimes. Life's greatest teachers wear the simplest uniforms. Don't judge, learn." Movie Camera subscribe for Chapter 2 of this powerful story and discover the truth behind Mr. Bennet's past. Evelyn Harrington sat at her office desk long after everyone had gone home, staring at the sealed file she had found earlier that day. The Golden City lights flickered through the glass wall behind her, but her mind was elsewhere. Something about Mr. Bennet had always seemed deeper. The way he spoke, the calm confidence in his voice, the humility in his eyes. It didn't fit the story of a man broken by life. Her curiosity gnawed at her. Finally, she broke the seal. The document was a personnel file from nearly 20 years ago. As her eyes scanned the papers, her heartbeat quickened. Name, Thomas Bennett. Position, Senior Financial Consultant, Harrington Enterprises. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. He used to work here, not as a janitor, but as one of the company's top analysts. The next line froze her heart completely. Awarded for exposing internal corruption, dismissed after incident involving former management. Evelyn's hands trembled as she flipped through the file. She realized the man sweeping her company floors once stood at the very heart of it. But why did no one ever tell her? Why had he returned, not as a leader, but as a janitor? Haunted by questions, Evelyn called her assistant to check old archives. Hours later, the truth unfolded like a long-buried wound. 2 decades ago, before Evelyn became CEO, the company had been under her late husband's control. Back then, Thomas Bennett was a brilliant consultant who discovered that the board was embezzling millions from workers' pension funds. He tried to expose it, but before he could, someone framed him for falsifying reports. He lost his job, his reputation, and everything he'd worked for. The company swept it under the rug. Evelyn's husband, though not directly involved, had turned a blind eye to protect the company's image. Evelyn felt a cold shiver down her spine. The man who had been mopping her floors all these years wasn't just a janitor. He was a man whose career her own family had destroyed. And yet, instead of revenge, he had chosen kindness. Instead of bitterness, he taught her daughter compassion. Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes as she realized how blind ambition had blinded her to humanity itself. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Evelyn called for a company-wide meeting. Executives filled the grand auditorium, whispering among themselves. The CEO rarely called sudden assemblies. When the lights dimmed, Evelyn walked to the stage, holding the same file in her hand. "Today," she began, her voice echoing across the silent room, "I want to tell you about a man who has taught me what true leadership means." She paused, scanning the room. Many of you pass him in the hallways. You've seen him with a mop in his hand, cleaning your offices, emptying your trash. You've probably never said his name, but I learned that he was once one of the brightest minds in this company, a man who stood up for truth when no one else did. She held up the file. "His name is Thomas Bennett." Gasps rippled across the room. Evelyn's voice trembled as she continued. "Years ago, he was falsely accused by this very company. Because of our mistakes, he lost everything. Yet instead of hatred, he chose humility. Instead of revenge, he chose to help. And without even realizing it, he has now taught my daughter and me what integrity truly looks like." She turned toward the entrance where Mr. Bennett stood, stunned, holding his mop. "Mr. Bennett, would you please join me on stage?" Room erupted in applause as the old man hesitantly walked forward, his hands shaking. He looked lost, unsure why the woman who once ruled the company like steel was now addressing him with such warmth. Evelyn smiled gently. "You were wronged, and today I want to make it right." she turned to the audience. From this day forward, Mr. Thomas Bennett will serve as Director of Ethics and Mentorship for Harrington Enterprises. The crowd gasped again, then cheered. Mr. Bennett's eyes filled with tears. He shook his head slowly. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say. I don't deserve this." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "You deserve much more than this, Mr. Bennett. You've already been a teacher to my daughter, and now I hope you'll be one for us all." That night, Evelyn returned home to find Leela sitting on the couch with a book open. "Mom, did you do it?" she asked eagerly. Evelyn smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. Mr. Bennett's no longer the janitor. He's back where he belongs." Leela clapped her hands in delight. "He'll be so happy. He told me once that the hardest part of life isn't falling, it's being brave enough to stand again." Evelyn sat beside her, her heart swelling with pride. "He's right," she whispered. "And because of him, I'm learning to stand too." They sat in silence for a while, the soft hum of the city outside filling the room. Evelyn realized that in all her years chasing success, she had forgotten what truly mattered: kindness, empathy, humility, and time spent with those she loved. Weeks later, Harrington Enterprises began to change. Under Mr. Bennett's mentorship, employees started attending voluntary workshops about honesty and balance in life. Productivity soared, but more importantly, so did compassion. Workers from all levels shared stories of struggle, and Evelyn listened. She wasn't just a CEO anymore, she was a leader with a heart reborn. Mr. Bennett became known as the heart of Harrington. Even visitors felt the difference. The company once built on ambition now stood on humanity. But the biggest change came one sunny afternoon when Leela presented her mother with an essay she had written for school titled "The Janitor Who Taught Me to Dream." Evelyn read it slowly, tears filling her eyes. In it, Leela wrote, "Mr. Bennett showed me that people's value doesn't come from what they wear, but from what they share. He taught me that kindness is a language that everyone understands." Evelyn hugged her daughter tightly, whispering, "You've learned the greatest lesson of all." Months passed. One morning, Evelyn entered her office to find a letter on her desk written in neat, careful handwriting. It was from Mr. Bennett. "Dear Mrs. Harrington," it read, "I want to thank you for giving me a second chance, not at a job, but at dignity. But now, I believe it's time for me to rest. I've done what I came here to do, to teach your daughter and remind you of what matters most. Please don't be sad. I'm not leaving with regret, but with peace." Evelyn's hands trembled as she finished reading. Attached to the letter was a small locket, inside which was a faded photo of Mr. Bennett's late wife and a note that said, "Thank you for helping me keep my promise to her to never stop teaching." The next day, they found that Mr. Bennett had passed away peacefully in his sleep. The entire company mourned as though they'd lost a family member. Evelyn held a memorial in his honor, naming a new scholarship after him, the Bennett Foundation for Honest Education, helping underprivileged students pursue learning without barriers. As she spoke before the crowd, she said through tears, "Mr. Bennett may have swept floors, but he also swept away arrogance, ignorance, and pride from our hearts. He showed us that no title, no fortune, no success is greater than compassion. Years later, Leela grew up and became a teacher herself. On the wall of her classroom hung a framed quote from Mr. Bennett: "Every problem has a solution, as long as you balance both sides." She never forgot those words, or the man who had changed her mother, her home, and her heart forever. And as the narrator's voice fades, the camera zooms out to show the golden logo of Harrington Enterprises shining under the sun, now engraved with a new motto beneath it: "Built on integrity, inspired by humanity." Speech balloon in life: never judge someone by their job. True greatness often hides behind humility. Movie Camera subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one, where kindness, courage, and compassion redefine success.